Well, hello and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We have a very special guest on today. It is Sharleen Joynt from Juan Pablo season of The Bachelor. She's done many other things besides that. But Sharleen, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Sydney. It's nice to be here.
I know. I'm so excited because we are kind of doing, like Andy said, a role reversal, whereas last week we got to sit down with my boyfriend and you and your husband, and it was super fun. So I wanted to kind of get to know you even more because I feel like we've kind of gotten to know each other because we've lived very similar lives. We both won in The Bachelor. We both live in New York City at one point. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we probably passed each other on the street
at times.
What?
So both in the performing arts in various ways.
Exactly.
Too. I think that's a whole other thing.
I know. Well, I honestly bet that we have at one point passed each other on the street without knowing it.
100%. It makes me a little sad because I really do feel like we were two ships in the night.
I know it could have been, but there's still time. You never know. We might get there one day.
One day.
But usually with my guest, I like to kind of go back to the beginning of where it all began for them. And I know it for you might have been 6 or 7 years ago, but I do want to touch a little bit on your time on The Bachelor, because I feel like that's kind of where most people know you from originally and kind of like what you're known for a little bit now. So going back to that time, I kind of want to know just like why you wanted to initially ever go on the show. What drew you to The Bachelor?
Yeah, it's been a minute. And I actually haven't been asked that in a while because it's just so much time has passed. Mm-hmm. But it's actually kind of interesting to look back on it now, being in my mid 30s, because at the when I answered that question a lot soon after the show, I feel like I saw it differently than I would say I do now. Mm-hmm. But now, whenever I talk to people who are around your age, I guess you're 29, I think.
Yes, I am. Very good.
Where I do feel like a lot of women sort of have this, I call it third life crisis, mm-hmm. where you just don't feel like you're where you should be in your life and career and love life, and maybe just not where you thought you would be. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely where I was when I went on the show at 29. I was having something of a crisis, just wondering, I was doing everything that I should be doing for mm-hmm. my career, which is singing opera. And I was doing everything according to plan, and I was dreadfully unhappy. And that was a bit of a disturbing realization, I think, when you pursue something that on paper you pursue for joy, for mm-hmm. happiness. You know, it's not like I became an accountant to make sure I had a steady paycheck. I pursued something that should ostensibly bring me unadulterated joy, and it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I was sort of emotionally when I applied for the show, just sort of needing just an adventure, I guess. I mean, this was pre-Instagram being what it is now. Yeah. And so it wasn't even to, pivot my career or anything. It really wasn't. It was just wanting to sort of have an adventure that I would never otherwise be able to do, when I knew that at 29, I was probably getting on in bachelor years. And I was newly single, and I was like, well, no time like the present. And I did a crazy thing.
Wow. I can relate to that story so much. I'm actually, like you said, I'm 29 now. And almost, do you believe in Saturn returns or anything like that? That time in your life where you're trying to get all your chips to fall into place, and you kind of reevaluate where you are in your life. And it's usually around that 29 period where I'm feeling that currently. But I also can relate to the fact that you're a performer and you're an opera singer, which I think is so incredible. And I love that you're still doing it. But yeah, I remember at that time specifically, I needed something to kind of switch my life up. And I didn't expect it to be The Bachelor. I didn't expect that to be what did it, but that absolutely was. So for you, once you finally made that decision to go on the show, was it like that thing that you felt was missing, or did it bring something out of you that helped kind of push you in a different direction once you went on the show?
Gosh, that's such a great question. You're good at this. It was a bit of both. I don't, like in your case with Nick, it's clear The Bachelor is the reason why you met Nick mm-hmm. and why you're now living in Ohio. So it's a little more cause and effect that way. Yeah. Same with like Kayla Quinn is another good example. She became mm-hmm. a full-time blogger, and then became friends with another blogger who set her up with her soon-to-be husband. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say for me it was as linear, where The Bachelor led to another thing which sort of changed my life path.
Mm-hmm.
But what it did was it gave me a certain confidence in who I am. This is going to sound super cheesy, but I've always felt like a bit of a misfit in
Mm.
life. And regardless of what industry I was in, like I felt a bit like a misfit on The Bachelor. I felt like a bit of a
Mm-hmm.
misfit in the opera world. And I guess what I learned is that it's okay, and that there are a lot of misfits out there. And I'm sure you can attest to this. It can be very powerful
Mm-hmm.
to learn that you resonate with so many people for being nothing other than yourself,
Mm.
even if you've always felt quite weird.
Yes. Yeah,
So it's kind of powerful.
it gave you that licensing to kind of be yourself, it seems, from your experience. Because
Yeah.
you were
And
celebrated for that for sure once you were on the show.
yeah, I mean, a lot of people hated me for it, but the
Yeah.
people who loved me for it were really passionate about it. And I don't think it can be overestimated, the impact that can have on you. And in my case, it helped me sort of find my voice, and even helped me in my personal life with friendships. It helped
Mm-hmm.
me know when to say no in my own career,
Mm.
and not just say yes because it's a paycheck. It gives you the power and the strength and the clarity to make decisions for your own life. I guess it sort of gives you a little wind beneath your sails. It's a little cheesy, but
No,
it gives you confidence in yourself. That, especially, I think you're right. I've actually never heard the expression Saturn returning. Did you say?
yes. It's like in everyone's charts at certain, it's usually around 29. Everyone goes through like a big shift. And
It makes sense.
yeah.
Also, just even culturally, societally speaking, as a woman, 30 is an intimidating number. And now
Mm-hmm.
that it's way in my rear view mirror, I can see that it's really not as scary as people make it out to be.
Yeah.
But I remember feeling that way. I thought 30, like my life is over. Like I better have a clear set plan of marriage and kids and everything, because God forbid I hit 30 and not have those things in order. It's
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous.
Yeah, I totally get that mindset. And for me, especially for when I went on the show, it was like, okay, I focused so much of my life on career, dance, trying to make that my thing. I was like dancing for the Knicks at the time, but then
Which
I
is
put,
amazing, by the
yeah,
way.
it was fun, but there was no focus on relationship. So you said for you had just gotten out of a relationship. Did you feel like the process of going through the show kind of helped you find that relationship aspect in your life that you were looking for? Maybe not from Juan Pablo, but from what you learned through that relationship process? Because it seems like it can be like a deep dive in like relationship boot camp when you're there.
Yeah, and we talked about this with you on our podcast, dear
Mm-hmm.
Shandy, where you said like it helped you sort of identify what you were even looking for when you just turn off all the noise, and
Yeah.
multiple hours a day you're in a room just talking about your feelings and what you want in a partner. It can be
Mm-hmm.
very enlightening. In my case, I'm not gonna lie, it didn't really do that for me. And it just didn't. Like, I think it's sort of a combination of my own dating history. I have a very colorful dating history. I dated a
Mm-hmm.
lot before The Bachelor, after The Bachelor. I've always been interested in dating. Like I wanted to spend my 20s dating, even if it was a disaster. I just wanted to have that so that I could look back and be like, in my day. So
Amazing.
I was pretty clear on what I wanted. That didn't mean that it was clear cut, the experience, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Like the Bachelor
Absolutely.
experience can be confusing, especially when you take into account, the blinders, the environment, how the
Yes.
Bachelor is hyped up to be God's gift.
Yes. I related to you a lot on that as well. I was watching some of Juan Pablo's season earlier, which I had never fully watched the full thing. And it's kind of funny to look back and like see it now from different eyes and a different version of The Bachelor. But you stood out to me, and I'm sure a lot of people, because you questioned kind of everything. You questioned yourself, you questioned your feelings for him, you questioned if he was it for you. And I felt like you were just through the process, you were just constantly checking in with yourself and almost I don't want to say overanalyzing it, but in a way, overanalyzing everything. Do you feel like that was right now looking back on it, or would you have done things differently if you could go back? Well, now you're married and all the things, but like thinking back on that experience.
Yeah, I do wish I had chilled out a tiny bit. I do think I overanalyzed it, and I was just so paranoid of being duped, of being played a
Mm,
fool, of looking back on the experience and watching it back and not recognizing myself. That was my
mm-hmm.
big fear. That you're constantly encouraged to do things that are outside of your comfort zone, and I understand living life to the fullest and embracing that experience for what it is. But we both know that this is not something you just do and then forget about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, it can really alter your life. In my case, my online life, if you Google my name, opera is not the first thing that comes up. It's the fact that I was on The Bachelor.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had to live with that for the past 7 years. And there are times where I'm not thrilled about that, but what are you going to do? So I wanted to be able to look back and really recognize myself. So in a sense, the overanalyzing is very on brand.
Good.
Like, it's definitely who I am. And so but the same way I kind of wish I had chilled out for most of my 20s,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish I'd been able to laugh at it a bit more,
Yeah.
just sort of chill. Like all the times where I was all like losing sleep over a guy or a career decision, I think time really does put a lot of things in perspective. And I just sort of wish I had been a little more relaxed. Those
Mm-hmm.
things in the grand scheme of things don't really matter that much, as long as
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you're yourself.
I agree. It's funny because you put yourself in the situations to be chill and to go on the adventures. Like you said, you spent most of your 20s dating, you on a dating show, but then once you were in it, you were controlled in a way, which I totally understand because you're like, I'm taking all these steps to be spontaneous, but when I'm actually being spontaneous, I'm not being spontaneous.
100%. And I mean, I think your experience on Colton's season was kind of similar. I mean, I don't know if you overanalyzed, but you were definitely like, you were definitely yourself. Or
Mm-hmm.
I think, the reserved side of yourself, which I think I
Mm-hmm.
was too. But I mean, I love the moment you left. You were like, I'm good.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool to look back on that and be like, that's 100% who I am. And I don't know you that well, but I know that you cannot regret that decision, that
Mm-hmm.
was not who you were.
Mm-hmm. You also had one of those moments too when you left the show. And I could tell from that that you are a very smart person. You're aware of yourself and your surroundings. And you kind of analyzed and did the math and it added up to you not needing to stay. Like, what was your kind of mindset around leaving at the time? I know, again, it was a while ago, but then what was your mindset then? And then, like, how do you look back on that, Sharleen, and how do you feel about her?
It was just such a different time. Like, the show was something different then. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I took it all very sincerely. It would be insincere today to pretend that with the world of Instagram and the benefits of making Final Four and just seeing how far you can go on this show and
Mm-hmm.
maybe gunning for Bachelorette, it would be naive of me to think that if the climate were the same as it is today, that I would be like, no, I can't see myself marrying this man. Like, does every
Mm-hmm.
Final Four contestant really see themselves like shacking up, getting married, making babies, and growing old with their bachelor or bachelorette? If they say they do, they're lying.
Yeah.
100%. It was me.
Mm-hmm.
I look back on that and I recognize myself, and it was very pragmatic how I chose to leave. Like, I had 2 one-on-one dates, and I knew I was going to get a hometown if I stayed.
Mm-hmm.
Just I had that level of confidence in what we had, and it's I don't know if I can answer that question because there's so many variables that have changed
Yeah.
with that show. But there is a part of me that's like, you should have just chilled out a bit. Even if you couldn't see yourself marrying the guy,
Yeah.
it would have been a neat experience to have him come to Ottawa, Canada, and meet your family and have them have that experience.
Yeah.
There's just, I took it all very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Which I think that's a great way to handle it, is to take it seriously because it is your life. And especially now with how it is, it becomes even more a part of your life after you're on the show even.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Like it continues to. I mean, all these years later, I never in a million years when I applied for that show would think that 7 years after my season, I would be doing a podcast with someone like you, who in my eyes has been on relatively recently, though I'm sure it feels like ancient history to you.
I know, right? Because it's just like a year goes by and into some people's eyes, it's like you're forgotten. They never remember you. But then you'll see someone on the street and they're like, oh my God, were you on Colton season? I'm like, yeah, I guess that was 2 years ago. But yeah, it's funny how it kind of stays with you. And it's interesting how people still like to know about it.
It's very sweet, honestly, that how the longevity factor is really very sweet. I got recognized a couple of days ago with my mask on.
Yeah, I'm always shocked by that.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, I am very irrelevant at this point. And for me to get recognized with my mask on, I was just like, I felt like I was so awkward. I didn't even know how to handle the exchange. I was like, hello. But it's just funny how all these years later, people, even if they don't know exactly who you are, they know your face, you know, and so question for you, when someone's like, you look familiar, do you say it's because I was on The Bachelor, or do you play dumb?
It depends on my mood and if I want to engage or not. I'll be like, oh, that's weird. Or I'll be like, yeah, did you watch The Bachelor? And they'll usually say yeah. So it just kind of depends on how I'm feeling. How do you?
Yeah, all of the above. It's same. All of the above. Once in a while, if I'm just not in the mood to go through that, you know, if they know my name, if they know my face, or if they're like opera singer, then that's different. But when they're like, you look familiar, I'm like,
weird. I did want to kind of get your perspective on Bachelor then versus what you see on Bachelor now, because you have this amazing blog and you kind of do recaps and reviews and on the show. And I was reading some of them earlier and they're very, very interesting and very well done and well written and just amazing to read. But so yeah, how is your perspective from how Bachelor has changed from Juan Pablo season to where we're at now in this hot mess, if you want to call it that?
I mean, it is certainly a hot mess today. I mean, in my opinion, I'm going to sound like an old fart, but I really don't think it's changed for the better. I don't think that social media, it has helped with casting the show. I think that they're able to get a certain caliber of human that they maybe couldn't get 10 years ago. But, you know, 10 years ago, they were probably relying more on people like me who were having some sort of a crisis in their life and just needed an adventure. But there was still more of a negative stigma around going on the show then than there is now.
Yeah.
I got a lot of, why are you on this show? Like, why is someone like you on a show like that kind of thing? And I still get that to this day, unfortunately, because the opera business is kind of snooty. For me, just the gaming of the system, which is, again, one of the reasons why you always resonated with me, because when you were on the show, that was fully a time when the system could be gamed. At my time, it wasn't quite there yet. And you still were just like, I'm good. Like, you were completely sincere in that.
Yeah.
We're now in a time where a villain isn't really a villain necessarily. It could be just someone playing a villain-esque role to get airtime. And even if they're a bitch for 80-90% of the time on the show, if they have some redemption story or they go in paradise for the redemption, then that can turn into something else. And then they have 1 million followers and they can do whatever they want. I'm a little too old school in that I really did used to watch this show for that connection, that romantic relationship, which now feels kind of like smoke and mirrors at least 50% of the time.
I agree. I think watching it now for me, because of that, I am less inclined to connect to the people on the show because I don't believe it. Maybe it's because I'm like, I've been on it and I've seen the backstory of it, or it's because they are playing on just the drama of it all and just getting the views and like the quick clickbait moments that you can kind of put on social media versus the actual connection. So I don't know if that's a thing from casting. I don't know if that's editing, but it seems like it's gotten to this whole place that they almost don't know how to like pull back from. They're in this weird spiral.
I think it's when Alon Gale left, personally.
I agree.
There's no nuance anymore. It's so fabricated to the point where anyone could tell. Like in the old days, in my early recapping days, I could tell because I had been there, and then in my recaps I would describe it.
Yeah.
But now it's just so obvious what they're doing. It's like, oh, add some new girls. First of all, give no time to girls, and then bring in new girls so that the girls who are already there hate the new girls.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, we get it. You did that once. You don't need to do it every single season, but it's very uncreative.
Yeah.
And I think in Alon's day, there was nuance. And I can say that having been one of his girls, as they say. I did ITMs with Alon multiple times a day. His ITMs were like true conversations, deep conversations, and there was no time limit on them. It wasn't like, okay, 20 minutes, get out of here. We would be in there for hours talking about our feelings, and they would take some gem from those hours spent in an ITM room. Well, I've done ITMs with some other people, and I know that they're not all like that.
Did they ever ask you to potentially be the Bachelorette? Or because I know I looked up when Paradise started was 2014, which I believe is the same year that Juan Pablo season was. Was that ever a conversation for you around that time?
Yeah, we did discuss Paradise because that was the first Paradise season. But to be honest, I was really bummed because I loved Bachelor Pad, which is going to be ancient for you, but it was the spin-off before Paradise, and it was such a better show in every way. And I would have considered that. But Paradise, I was sort of like, I don't know what that is. And I had just met Andy recently and was pretty sure that that was solid, and it just sort of fizzled out. But no, they never asked me to be Bachelorette. And I'm not surprised about that. But I get asked that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you could have done the role very well. I could see it. So, but I think at the time,
you're sweet to say that. I don't know. I think that like 10% of the viewership would be very into it, and the other 90% would be like, get off the stage.
Yes. Well, either way, you lived happily ever after, so they say. So I'm happy to see that. I guess my last question on that is, do you feel like the franchise will continue on after these last couple of seasons that they're filming currently?
It's funny you say that, because I've had a lot of friends say lately that they think it's not going to. What do you think?
I keep reading that as well. I feel like, I don't know. It's all going to depend on viewers. I guess like what ends the show. Is it you don't get enough funding and you can't do it anymore, but I feel like they have enough money for a billion years
forever?
Or is it just like we see that this can no longer keep going? I'm not sure on like what the decision would be, but I feel like it could be a good place to end if it were to end.
I feel like if they meaning the powers that be, yeah, the powers that be. I always refer to the powers that be in my recaps, because we know the gist of who they are, but I think it's more complex than just a couple of white men in suits.
Yeah.
If I felt the powers that be were truly morally disturbed by the recent happenings on their own show that they allowed to happen, then I would think maybe they would step down. I just really can't picture this show ever taking true ownership and ending for that reason.
Yeah.
I guess they have a history of slapping a Band-Aid on PR shitstorms like this. And in this case, they, during Black Lives Matter, they're like, oh, hey, Black Bachelor. Like, why did it take that movement to cast your first Black Bachelor after 20 seasons? Why did it take that? And then in this case, with the Bachelorette, they clearly had planned on having Katie, and and then they're like, oh, Michelle too. It's just that's great. Like, I love Michelle, and that's awesome. I want her to be Bachelorette, but I just feel like they don't ever make statements that actually take responsibility. It's just constantly sidestepping and then coming out with this announcement that the majority of people are happy with, and that it feels like addresses the problem without actually addressing it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
So you're getting me all riled up. I know.
So it's like, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I guess it just depends on what describes a show being canceled or ended. Like, who decides that? I don't even know.
The viewers, I think. Don't you think?
Yeah.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know the answer to that. But this show is massively popular, and I think it takes a lot to get people to stop watching a show that is almost a part of their culture.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something people do as much for the social aspect as the actual entertainment value.
Mm-hmm.
How much entertainment value are we still getting out of it, really?
Yeah, that's true. It's mostly about the conversation and the things that are happening off the show. So it's like, do we
100%.
even need it? I don't know. It's an interesting thought, but yeah, I don't have an answer for what's going to happen, but I guess we'll watch and find out, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't have an answer either. It's hard to fathom, just based on the things that have gotten us here to this point, that they would be like, oh, we've done too many wrongs. Like, we're going to pull
Yeah.
the plug on this massive, iconic show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very famous and
Mm-hmm.
referenced.
Everywhere.
I mean, it's parodied, referenced everywhere. I just don't really see them pulling the plug on it because of this.
Well, we will find out.
We shall. Time will tell.
I want to go off of that topic a little bit and kind of discuss more on your blog and kind of your career and how it works to be an opera singer and all those amazing things that you do. But one thing that stuck out to me while reading your blog earlier today was the idea of taking on and off your business hat, and how being a performer, it's kind of hard to see yourself in that business aspect, which I have connected with that a lot. And especially lately is just kind of seeing myself more than just a performer, because when you think of performing, for me, it was always like, I'll do the jobs. I will do it for free. I will show up. I'll be there early. I'll do the extra work. And it's not necessarily direct payment for that, but it's more of just like fulfilling that passion. So kind of talk me through your experience with that and where your head's at as far as like business versus passion, and how you kind of view both of those things now in your life.
That's a mountain of a topic that I know you can relate to. I've just never, it's like I wrote, I've never been a businesswoman, and I don't necessarily think the creative arts or the performing arts, or just being a creative in general, prepares you for needing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it does now. Maybe if I went and got my music degree now, there would be a whole category dedicated to marketing, social media, PR, everything. But in my day, I got my bachelor, I got my master's, and then I went into the world to sing opera.
Mm-hmm.
And it now feels sort of archaic to sort of think that the world will work like a meritocracy, where really just the best person gets the gig.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I actually really hate that. It's something that keeps me up at night. And I struggle a lot with social media in general, and the concept of asserting your expertise in something that you may not actually be an expert in. Mm-hmm. But if you assert it convincingly enough, then what's the difference, you know? So this is something I struggle with. And also, and I'm curious to know if you relate to this as a dancer, but we're, at least as singers, very used to getting criticism. Sometimes constructive, sometimes just to make you feel terrible about yourself. But it instills in you the sense of not ever truly being confident in what you have and what you do. Do you relate to what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, that hit a really deep place in my gut. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hate that. I mean, I have 2 degrees in singing. I am a working opera singer. I've been working since I graduated. On paper, I should be so confident in my singing, and that confidence should bleed into my other pursuits. And it doesn't, because I have this deeply embedded inferiority complex that I constantly need to prove myself. Even when I've gotten the gig, that first day I opened my mouth for our first sing through of a role, I'd better nail it, because I'm still auditioning every time I open my mouth. I'm sure when you do any kind of show, that every time you dance, everyone's watching. You can never just relax. And therefore, with that mindset, you sort of hope that with that hard work and dedication, that would be enough. And so I guess the combination of the two is maddening to me, that we live in this world where people can get ahead by just asserting that expertise or that confidence. And that's constantly, for me, battling that sense in me that it does not have a deep-seated confidence, because that's sort of what the arts have done to me. I'm not really necessarily saying I have the answer to this. For me, I guess I've fought really hard to surround myself with ears and gurus who build me up as well as impart wisdom and feedback,
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to prove myself to the people who sort of feed off that insecurity of mine, if that makes sense. That was a really long, convoluted answer. I'm sorry.
No, I loved everything because I will go from the dance perspective, all of those things still connect for me. And even though, as I said, like I was doing all the jobs and I had made it to certain points in my career where I felt good about getting that job every single day, I would wake up with anxiety of like, oh, I'm going to be fired today, or I'm going to do something wrong, or I don't know enough, or I haven't been trained enough, or I'm not good enough. And I had been dancing since a 3-year-old. So if you think about that, I'm sure a lot of people go through that in other aspects of their life, but I think especially for performing, there's a whole other element to that. And it is that criticism factor where you're constantly expecting it and also expected to constantly be seeking it out. So like, what can I do better? Like how was that? How was that? Was
Yeah,
it any better than last time? Yeah.
100%. If you don't view every bit of criticism as constructive, then you don't have the skin for it. You're
Yes.
told that you have the wrong mindset. You should not have pursued this if you just expected to be praised all the time. But I do think there's a fine line between constructive criticism and just sort of, I do think that there are older people in the performing arts who kind of get off on tearing down.
Oh yeah. Because they received that when they were younger. So it's like the vicious cycle of it all where they're now bestowing that onto the younger generation.
100%.
And it is interesting now with social media and how that's kind of affecting, it's kind of washing it all around. For example, I would go to auditions a few years ago and they would ask me to write down my social media following as a part of the casting. And I'm like, this is a job on a stage. Yeah. So it's interesting how that is now adding to it, but it has nothing to do necessarily with what we're doing. So I'm interested to see what happens with performing arts in general, especially after last year. But
100%. And I know that same thing has affected the modeling industry. 100%. Opera, I think, opera is very old school to the point where I actually think the association of my following, which cannot be disconnected from the Bachelor, I don't think it helps me at all. It might actually hurt me because of the Bachelor Association, but they certainly don't care about your following. But I also wonder how long that will last for, because it just feels like it's now infiltrating every single business. And it makes me sad. Yeah. Sydney, it makes me sad because it just feels like, I don't know about you, I struggle with knowing what to share, what to post. I struggle with the consumptive nature of the entire business, you know, posting cute outfits, and when landfills are continuously being filled with cheap clothes, and just sort of the entire industry of benefiting off the low self-esteem of other people, I guess. So it's just a constant struggle. I mean, I hate social media more than I love it, for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I go through ups and downs with this where I feel if I'm not, it could be the dancer in me, or if I'm not showing a finished product, or I'm not helping someone, or if I'm not making this like grandiose post every day, then I'm not doing something right. But it's also from the creative side of myself. We're not used to like constantly producing, like doing something, producing it, showing it. It's like for a performer, we rehearse for a year and then we perform. It's not like I do a picture and I throw it out, or I do another video, and it's just like constant, like regurgitating media in a way. So
I love that you said that, because that's definitely something I struggle with. I don't understand why anyone would care about a cute selfie.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's it. That's what you want. But that will perform way better than something that I've put a lot of thought and, as you say, like producing or production into. And it's just, I guess I just don't get it. But I do think that being in the performing arts does lend to that, because I'm used to rehearsing an opera for 4 to 6 weeks before any eyeballs see it.
Absolutely.
I want to feel like what I put out is really polished. And I don't know if that's what people want to see though.
Exactly. I think it's shifting now because of social media, as people are wanting to see more reality in a way, which would make sense why we're so drawn to these shows like The Bachelor, that it's reality based. I wonder then, if you were to give someone advice, because you, looking at you from the outside, you are very confident and assured and talented. And how do you go about not letting yourself shift into the insecure mindset or the criticism or the things that you have to go through every day as a performer? Like, how do you kind of pick yourself up and keep pushing, keep going towards your goals and your passions?
Going so deep today, Sydney.
I know, I'm feeling it.
I'm feeling it too. Want to reiterate what I said earlier, which is the concept of surrounding yourself with people. The term tribe is overused, but I really think there's truth in that. And that could be in your platonic friendships. It could be your romantic partner. It could be your teacher or your mentor.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be your mentor, whoever you choose to spend your time with or are paying for their feedback or their ears or whatever. That has been really game changing for me. Instead of trying to prove myself to people who I wasn't, like I said, being built up by. I spent 9 years with a voice teacher who was a wonderful voice teacher, but who made me feel really dependent on her and kind of terrible about myself in many ways. And there came a day where I had just had enough. And it happened at around 29.
Saturn Returning, we got to look it up for you.
Maybe Saturn played a role in that. And that's where The Bachelor sort of comes back into play here, is that giving you that wind in your sails where you feel like you have a better sense of what your calling is based on how people respond to you. And I again, based on how they respond to what feels like is authentic to you, if that makes sense. So maybe not the polished, professionally taken photo of you wearing a dress that you didn't buy, that was gifted to you or whatever, but the stuff that where you put your soul out there and that resonates with people. So there's that too. And also, and this might be an annoying answer, I really feel like with age comes confidence. In my case, I'm 10 times more confident than I was 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, I was 10 times more confident than I was 5 years before that. In my own skin, in my passions, in the decisions I make. It's funny that you say that on the outside. I get that, and I don't know how to change that. It's not that I want to put out this impression of not having my shit together, but I think fewer people have their shit together than you would think.
I agree with that.
In all the ways, at least. Like, there might be someone who professionally has all their shit together, but then they are terrible with relationships or partnerships. It's sort of like life is like whack-a-mole. You might get one mole, but then there's another one. I just think that no one fully has their shit together, and we're all just doing our best. And that's why I really think people should think twice before being mean to each other.
Agreed. And I like that you share that too, because not everyone is willing to admit that necessarily, that they might not have their shit together. And even though people might perceive that, and I feel like, especially with social media, we're constantly trying to like prove that we're perfect and everything's together. And I just showed up like this and it was great. So yeah, I like that you are willing to share that.
It's the truth.
Yeah, we're all just trying to get by.
Yeah. And I also feel like I feel differently about that now than I did even 1 year ago. And I'm sure you can attest to this, just how this last year has affected what we do. And we both do many things, by the way. I say that bearing in mind that you and I both wear many hats. And there are a few things that the pandemic has not touched or affected in some way. So I think that it's given us a lot to think about. In my case, it certainly has.
Absolutely. Do you feel that opera will be something that you will continue forever, or how do you feel about as far as performing goes? Because I'll just give myself an example. Because of the pandemic, it took me away from what I was focusing so much of my life on. It was kind of forced me to try other things and to find other ways to fill that cup for me, and to find ways where I feel like I'm performing, or I feel like I'm still have that part of me alive, but it's not necessarily in the same costume that it was before. Like, how do you feel as far as that goes for you with opera and after last year and everything?
I mean, I relate so hard to everything you're saying. I mean, there's a reason why I started a podcast this past year. You want to be creative and do things, and the opera industry was not thriving even before this pandemic hit, at least not in North America. So that's scary to think about, but I have no intention of quitting. For me, at least professionally speaking, I really felt like I was really like doing well and finally finding my stride with my career. And so the pandemic came at a very frustrating time. And I know everyone can relate. It came at a frustrating time for everyone.
I feel that for sure.
Yeah, there's no great time for a global pandemic.
No.
I definitely, have no intention of quitting, mainly because I want to see it through and know that I did 100%. I'm definitely reaching a point in my life where I feel this sense of wanting to live my life. When I look back to even 10 years ago, when I was in my mid-20s, like I said, I wish I'd sort of taken everything a little less seriously. Like, I wish I'd chilled out a bit more. I wish I'd gone on even more dates and just sort of gone for those opportunities that I didn't do because out of fear, or it was too effortful or whatever. And now I feel like I'm at this point where I don't want to ever look back and think, why didn't I give it that last push, or start that podcast, or do that silly seeming project when I could? You never know. As Andy said on a recent podcast episode, we might get hit by a bus tomorrow. So
true. And he has gone through a near-death experience, so he knows how that works.
That's true. That's true. Good memory.
The last few questions I have, because as you mentioned the podcast and how you started it with your husband, it's so fun. I've been listening to a lot of the episodes. And you guys said originally you started it because people always ask you advice, and you guys do give very great advice, and I've seen it and I've heard it. So I wanted to ask you last few questions, like just general advice questions that you would give people.
Yeah, we started it because truly this happens a lot in our lives. For some reason, I have girlfriends asking me about their relationships, and certainly Andy, my friends ask Andy. They love to get male perspective from Andy.
They love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny. And in our case, we are sort of out of that dating phase of our lives where we've been happily married or happily together for over 7 years. And we have a lot to draw from. Like, we really experienced all those things. So it is fun. What's interesting about the questions is that there really is this recurring theme. And to get back to Saturn returning, it's amazing how often the women are in, and I'm saying the women because like 97% of our listeners are female. I don't think that's surprising, but it is often around that concept of knowing with a capital K, and being at that point in your life where you are worried that you're not where you should have been. And so I think what we provide is certainly that hindsight being 2020 perspective. I'm not 29 presuming to know everything to tell another 29-year-old. Like, it's in the rearview mirror for both of us, and certainly in Andy's case, who's older than I am. And so there's just sort of life experience, and getting back to the thing when we talk about confidence. I struggle with having the right amount of confidence in many aspects of my life, but I know that I have confidence in the advice that we impart on this podcast, and therefore it feels right to lean into that, especially since it does seem to help people. Like, they seem to enjoy it.
It is helpful, and I love it. So I want to ask you I have like 3 questions for your advice. So kind of whatever comes off of your head for now. I know we've gone pretty deep today, but we have some younger listeners on this podcast, and everyone is kind of interested in this post-pandemic dating life. So any advice for someone out there who is post-pandemic trying to date, put themselves out there while feeling safe, but also ready for this new chapter in their lives?
The pandemic question has come up a lot, and it's tricky because there's just logistical issues there. But for me, just in terms of dating post-pandemic, I really implore people to talk to strangers. And I know that sounds really not saying take candy from strangers.
Yeah. Don't get in a van, but
Yeah, don't get in a stranger's van.
yeah.
But in general, the idea of finding someone attractive at a coffee shop and never acting on it because you're afraid of rejection or looking like a fool or whatever. I personally think that will have an upswing because right now everyone is so risk averse. Everyone is so focused on the apps and swiping right or swiping left, and just no one makes a move until it's like abundantly clear that the person is single and reciprocates. Yeah. I think that it's really good for a person's social acclimation to go up to someone and be like, I like your outfit, or I've seen you around here, and no big deal. I think you're cute. Like, do you want to get a coffee, or can I buy you a coffee? Just something that makes a stranger become an acquaintance. And I think we need that. I think we're all craving it. And I don't think our screens make us any happier. And so I encourage people to do that because I think you'd be surprised how magical that can be. And I say that having met my husband in person. We did not meet through a screen. You and Nick have a particularly cute story, which does involve screens, but that was a unique case. Yes. I would say just put yourself out there in ways that don't necessarily involve an app.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually talking to my dad about this because he started listening to an episode that Nick and I did about dating apps and kind of reviewing people's apps and their pages, and it was fun. But he was like, I can relate to that at all. Back in my day, we had to meet people, and then we had to call the house and then had to go meet the parents right away when we were picking them up. And people these days would never be able to do that. And I agree. That's a whole other element to it that people don't remember, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think what's additionally important to remember is that it doesn't cost you anything. Like, exactly. Yes, there's a bit of risk. And let's say you get rejected. Big deal. Like, it's good for you, frankly. Yeah. And even if the person's is not the sexuality you thought they were, or they're unavailable, or they're just not interested, you might have just made their day by approaching them at all. And again, it doesn't cost you anything.
I agree.
Just why not?
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
100%.
I have two more. How to move on from a heartbreak, and that can be career-wise or relationship.
Heartbreak. Oh, so it could be a career.
Either heartbreak? One. Mine are all career. So
my heart hurts with that one because it's tough. I think that distraction gets a bad rap in general. I'm not saying when you get your heart broken by a boyfriend that you go and have a one-night stand every night of the week.
Yeah.
But
maybe once.
Something like that. I think it's good to keep busy and to keep your options open, keep your blinders off. And while it's important to mourn whatever has not come to pass in the way you thought it would, like, I think that people often make this mistake of assuming that what they have to work with or their options are what they currently know about. And I think that a lot can change. Like, a year, people underestimate how much can happen in a year, how much your life can change in a year.
Oh, yeah.
And how meeting one person can completely pivot your entire trajectory. Yeah, the combination of those two things, not wallowing too much. There's a difference between mourning and wallowing, and distracting yourself with things that interest you. I'm not saying with whatever comes your way.
Yeah.
But by putting yourself out there and distracting yourself and just generally saying yes, it can often you could open 1,000 doors, but it just takes one door to really lead to something else. And we can both attest to that with The Bachelor.
Oh yeah. Huge door. The last one from this is, you actually did a blog post about this, but one thing that you wish you could tell your younger self.
One thing? Sydney, one?
I mean, you can do a couple. You can do a couple.
I mean, I feel like it's the theme of this entire conversation. Stressing about things that are, in the grand scheme of things, relatively inconsequential. And taking yourself and everything you're doing a little too seriously. Your 30s make you realize just how young 29 is. They're beautiful in that they bring, like I said, the sense of truly knowing yourself and confidence and wisdom, but they also bring things that happen with the passing of time and age. The time stops for no one. That's to say, prioritize spending time with the people that you don't want to regret not having done that for. The other is to, like I said, take all the little inconsequential things a little less seriously. I kind of, looking back, I'm like, I wish I have never had a one night stand in my life, despite all my dating.
They're not great.
I kind of wish I had. You know,
Yeah.
What'd you say?
So they're not, from my experience, they weren't great, but I didn't have that many. So maybe I should have had a better one.
Yeah, choose better.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my case, it's like, I was so hung up on like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But who cares? Like, who cares? If you're safe, it's experience. You're just, it's all well and good as long as you are safe. So just generally chilling.
Yeah. I can
chilling
use that
and putting and okay. And I would say the third one, sorry, this is a really long-winded answer.
It's okay.
Is because this has been a tough one for me. I feel like my 30s have been about coming to terms with my platonic friendships, which I have been navigating all through my 20s. I've always found romantic relationships easier to navigate than platonic friendships. I think friendships are a beast.
Yeah.
Depending on who your friends. Yeah. And just surround yourself with people who make you feel good. I learned that too late in life. I wish I could go back and tell myself 15 years ago that.
Yeah. And that can change too. Like they might make you feel good at some point in your life, but that might change as you grow or as they grow, or depending on what it
100%.
is.
100%. And don't make excuses for other people if that does change.
Yeah.
Don't always take the blame for that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to take a deep breath. This has been a deep combo. It's been good.
There was a podcast episode of yours I listened to, and it started, you're like, let's just all take a deep breath right off the bat. And I did it with you. I was like, and it felt so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were just very calming.
Last question I asked everyone, and I'm sure you know this because you listened, but one thing you've shared a lot that you would want to tell someone, or you think that you should share, anything that's been in your heart or mind lately that you could share with my listeners. I'll give you the floor.
Give others the benefit of the doubt. Too many people go to whatever the opposite of that is.
Especially
in
now.
everything. And yeah, especially now. And assumptions are never wise to lead with.
Well, again, I think
was that too short?
No, that was it. I mean, you've given me deep dives on every question I've asked you. So I loved that. It's simple, but effective. It is true. Where can everyone find you, your podcast, social media, website, all of that stuff, Sharleen?
Oh, you're sweet to say that. I'm on Instagram at Sharleen Joynt, spelled wrong in every way. Our podcast is at Dear Shandy. And my blog is alltheprettypandas.com, and I recap both there and for Flair magazine.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of your things.